Hi, I'm Kate from craftyattic.com. I'm going to show you how to make this soft sculpture mushroom. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a template for the little mushroom stalk. So it is 4 inches high, it's 1 inch at the bottom, and it's 3/4 of an inch at the top. So I'm just going to draw some straight lines, and then that's a bit too bendy, so I'm just eyeballing that and doing a slight curve. So just cut out the template now with a pair of scissors, and we're going to use that to draw around. So I have here some tea-dyed cotton open weave fabric. You can buy that on the website. And I'm just using my template now and an air erasable pen. These marks will erase themselves in a few hours. I'm just lightly drawing on where I want my little mossy bit to go at the bottom, and I'm using some embroidery threads, 520, 642 and 562, and I'm mixing single strands of each on a needle. So I'm just doing a series of little French knots across the bottom of this here. If you've not done a French knot before, I'll talk you through it. You just bring the needle up through your fabric, you wind 3 times around, and you pass the needle back down through the fabric again, and that will form a little knot for you. If you've not done them before and they end up a bit shaggy, it doesn't really matter. This is supposed to be moss. Moss is shaggy, it'll work. So I've just put a couple of different colours on the needle there, and what we're doing is we're trying to get a variance in tone here. So I'm leaving gaps between these little French knots. I'm going to fill in now with 2mm white pure silk embroidery ribbon. So I'm just going to thread this on my needle and tie a knot in one end. If you're a knot snob, then secure it in your desired fashion. So there's a nice little knot, and I'm just going to now continue to do French knots. So exactly the same method as before, except we're using silk ribbon this time. So I'm just going to carry on doing these little French knots. They're very, very simple. So just going to use these to build up a bit of texture in this mossy bit at the bottom. So because they're all white, I'm now going to use pens to dye them. I've got pear green, holly and grass. These are pro markers. They're permanent marker pens. And I'm just lightly touching each of the little knots with the pen. I'm going to actually mix the inks on these little knots so that we get a good variance of colour, and that all helps with the texture of this little group. So just touch the knots and they'll take as much colour as they need. Don't overdo it. So I've just got a single strand of my green embroidery thread here and some little green seed beads. I'm sewing these in because moss is very often a little bit wet and glossy, so this will give us that nice effect. And to give us a bit of shagginess here, I've just got a crochet hook. You can use a knitting needle or a bodkin, anything you've got. I'm just using 2 strands of the embroidery thread, and I'm just stitching over this needle hook thing. I'm just going to form a series of loops, and then I can remove the needle or whatever it is I'm using and just snip them to give me some more texture into my little mossy bit at the bottom here. So now I'm just going to use a single strand of the dark colour just to do some straight forward stitches up from this moss, just to give the idea that it's, you know, growing, sprouting upwards. And I'm now preparing a piece of 2mm pure silk embroidery ribbon, putting it onto a chenille needle. Chenille needles have nice fat eyes and really sharp points, and they're what you need for silk ribbon embroidery. So I'm just doing ribbon stitches here, so don't do them like that. So I'm just stitching through the centre of the ribbon itself and pulling very gently to form a little point at the top. I'm going to let them twist about a bit because these are supposed to be little leaves and pieces of grass and things. So ribbon stitches, once again, just stitch through the centre of the ribbon itself and pull very gently into a little point. So I'm just doing a little series of these, and I'm going to dye them in exactly the same way as I did with the knots. I'm going to use the Pro Marker pens to dye these. So I've got my pro markers here, the holly and the grass colour. I'm just touching the fine nib on these pens to the bottom of the dark colour, and then using the lighter colour at the top of the leaves and allowing the silk to blend them. So I've just got some 4mm here now. I'm just going to prepare it by running it through a set of mini straighteners, or you can iron it, and that will make it nice and glossy and smooth. I've tied a knot at one end. Because this is going to be stuffed, the knots won't show on the back, so don't worry about it too much. So I'm just going to do 4 little ribbon stitches to form a little tiny flower head, and these are quite small. You can see by the size of my fingernails and these little leaves how big, or little petals, how big they are. So I'm just going to do 4 ribbon stitches out from a central point to form a little tiny flower there, and I'm just going to do another little flower off to the other side as well. This hasn't really taken very long at all, and I'm just going to use the same pro marker type of pens to dye these little blooms when they're finished. So as you can see, it's only 4 stitches for a flower. That's it. Doesn't get much simpler than that. It's the quickest form of embroidery you can imagine. So I've got my purple and violet pens here, and I'm just going to use the bluer colour, that's the violet I think, in the centre of the flower, and then just use the purple on the tips. Once again, just allow the silk to blend the colours for you. Don't oversaturate it or it'll bleed out onto the backing fabric. So I've done 2 now, so that I've got both sides of my little stalk covered, and I'm just going to cut them out, leaving about a 6mm seam allowance around them, because that's what I'm going to need on my sewing machine when I put these together. So I'm just cutting them out now, and I'm just going to pin them together then, right sides together, so that I can then stitch them on the sewing machine. So I'm pinning at a 90-degree angle to the edge so that I don't have to take the pins out. I can just run the stitches straight through, and I'm using the air erasable pen just to mark there where I need to be stitching. So I've done the stitching on the sewing machine now, and I'm just going to turn this so that it's the right way round. So being careful not to catch any of those little silk flowers, and just there. It's got a little tube, okay, and I'm now going to stuff it. I've got some polyester stuffing. Use whatever you have to hand. Cotton wool, dog hair, whatever. So just stuffing it now, and you can start to see what this little stalk is going to look like. I've got here, this is the centre of a doily that I used on another project. If you find these crochet doilies in charity shops, always buy them, because they're only pennies, and they're so useful for cutting up for little bits and pieces. If you don't have one of these, you can just use some lace. So I'm just stitching that onto the stem now, onto the stalk of my little mushroom. And there, we've nearly done that piece. So I've got some lovely purple velvet, and I've just drawn around something to get a circle. It's about 3.5 inches in diameter, and now I've got something that's about 5 inches in diameter. This is all very ish. Whatever you happen to have to draw around, do it. So I've just cut out there a circle of the velvet and a larger circle of some felt. And now what I'm going to do is just run a gathering stitch around the edge of this felt circle, because I want to gather it up to form the cap of the mushroom. So I'm using 2 strands of just regular machine thread on a needle, and I'm just going round, all the way around, until I can gather it up evenly. And there I'm going to start to pin it now onto my velvet, right sides, pin it to the right side of the velvet there, all the way around, and I'm leaving a little aperture through which I can turn and stuff this little mushroom cap. So there, I've run my stitches round on the machine now, leaving my little gap open. So I'm just removing the pins, and I'm just going to clip the seams now nice and close so that it turns and behaves itself. and then when I've done that I can turn it and begin to stuff it. So push the seams out as much as you can and just stuff it with polyester stuffing or whatever you have to hand. And then all that remains to do with this little piece is to close this seam, just doing some hand stitching. So I'm just going to pin those, fold over the raw edges, just pin them together and then just stitch them with a little whip stitch to close this little gap off and form the mushroom cap. So you won't see these stitches, don't worry too much about them, you'll cover those eventually, so any old thread is probably okay. So now I'm going to move on to sewing the little fins, I think they are called, I don't know, underneath the mushroom. So I've got some yellow thread and some beeswax. I'm just preparing the thread by drawing it through the beeswax a couple of times, and I'm going to use some goldwork bullion. So this stuff is like a very tightly coiled little tiny spring. I'm stretching it out slightly before I start, and that way it will contract to the length of the stitches that I want to do. So I want them to go from the centre, almost the centre of this mushroom, out to the edge. So I'm just going to very roughly measure and chop some little pieces. I guess these are about 1 3/4 long, something like that, 1.5 inches. Doesn't matter. They will, because I've pre-stretched the wire slightly, as I say, they will shrink to the right length. And I'm just going to stitch through the edge now. Pick up one of these pieces of bullion on the needle to thread it like a bead, and then just stitch through the centre of the mushroom. I'm going to leave a little hole in the middle where I can attach the stalk. So I'm going to do 2 at 180 degrees from each other, and then I'm going to go across the other side and just section this up into halves and then eighths and then quarters, and then eighths. To just get a fairly even distribution, so they're like these little bullions look like spokes on a wheel when they're finished. So just threading them onto the needle and the thread here, and just continuing there to basically halve the distance that's left in between any of these two pieces. So you'll see what I mean. I've done sort of 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock, and now I'm going to do 1:30 as we go through. There's 1:30, look. So just continue going around like that until you've got as many on there as you can fit in the middle. So these goldwork bullions, you get 2 meters of it in a bag, and you'll stretch it out to be a lot longer than that. So one bag of these is £2.99, I think, and that will see you through this project and probably a couple of others as well. So they're just stitching these little fins on now. You can see how easy it is to thread a needle through the centre of this little spiral. So there we are, and I'm just going to now attach the stalk. So I'm stuffing enough stuffing in the top to keep it nice and rigid, and I'm just using a regular thread that's about the same colour as this tea-dyed cotton open weave fabric, and just stitching straight up through the top of the mushroom, and then through the stalk, and I'm going to carry on all the way around like that. This gives you a little dip in the centre of the mushroom cap at the top, but that's what they look like, so that's fine. So I'm just continuing all the way around now. So you can see now that we've nearly finished this little operation. It's been a very simple, quick little project this. It hasn't actually taken too long at all. You could do a few of these and put them together in a little group. So if you varied the height and the size of them, I think they'd look really cute together, and I might actually do that and introduce some embroidered lichen or something for a little base. So you can see we've got a slight dip in the top of this mushroom cap now, so just finish your stitches off to stop it coming undone. You're not going to see that bit. So clip off your thread, and I've now got a circle that's about 5.5 inches, slightly bigger than the white circle that we used for the top cap of the mushroom. Could be the same size, doesn't really matter, I don't think. So just cut out your circle of fabric now, and we're going to do exactly the same to this as we did to the piece of white felt. We're going to put a gathering stitch all the way around the edge so that we can gather this up and make it fit the top of our little mushroom to cover up all of our stitches. I quite like this fabric. When I found it in my sewing box, I thought, yeah, that looks very suitable. So there we go, all the way around, and then you can just pull it tight, make it, it almost looks like a little hat, which will sit on top of your mushroom. So you can put the little hat on top of your mushroom and then pull that gathering stitch nice and tight, and then just tack it so that it doesn't come undone. So just tack it down there just to hold everything in the right place. So I've got some purple thread now, matches the colour of the fabric. I'm going to lose the knot on the wrong side of this, and I'm just going to do a little back stitch, running back stitch all the way around the cap of this mushroom, just to hold this top fabric on. We have got a raw edge, but you know when you get mushrooms and they've got that very frilly bit around the inside of the cap, it's the bit that you catch hold of to peel them. So I'm leaving this raw edge because I think it looks like it should. So I'm just going to remove my gathering stitches now. That's a very simple operation, just to pull those out. And then I'm going to give the cap here a little trim, because I think that this is a little bit too long, this fringe here at the moment. So I'm just going to trim it down so that it's a reasonable size. It's probably a couple of mil, something like that. So just to finish this off, I thought it'd be fun to sew a little bead in the centre of each of the spots on this fabric. So I've got some, they're quite large seed beads here, and I'm just taking a thread, stitching from one spot to another, and just attaching a little bead in the centre of each spot. So that isn't going to take very long at all. Just to give it a bit of sparkle and a bit more texture. So when I finish this, the only thing that remains then is to close off the bottom of this mushroom. So I've just got some green felt, and excuse my head there, very sorry. I'm just going to very carefully draw around the base to give me a rough size, cut that out, and then I can just stitch that onto the base of this mushroom to finish it off. And that's it. You can obviously do different fabrics, different sizes, different cap shapes. That's basically how you do your soft sculpture mushroom. As I say, they'd look great in a little group all together, and they're really quick and they're fun to do as well. They look absolutely fabulous. So thanks very much for watching this video. Please go along to craftyattic.com, where you'll find the silk ribbons that you need to do this project, and you'll find the goldwork bullions as well if you want to use those for the fins on your mushrooms. And thanks very much for watching. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I'll be in touch with something new. I'm doing new projects all the time. And thank you for watching. Thanks for your time. Have fun. Bye.